question doesn't have any numbers on it, so we're going to make some numbers. We're going to start with this smallest one and say it has a diameter of 6, and we're going to say the diameter goes up by 2 each time. So the first thing, we're going to label all of these diameters. And we'll say they're all in centimeters. So we're making a fancy wedding cake. You're stacking all those cylinders on top of each other, and then you're wanting to ice it. We're going to figure out the total surface area to ice the whole thing. Yes?
How do you know it was 6, 8, 10?
I made those numbers up. Yeah. So we made up the 6, the 8, the 10. And what we're going to do is we're going to see now what, if we call this, we're going to label this cylinder number 1, cylinder number 2, number 3, and layer number 4. And then what we're going to do is we're going to find the total surface area of each one of those. And then we're going to imagine, what do we have to subtract? What didn't get iced if we pulled them apart? Okay? So the way that we set it up is we can figure out the surface area of that first cylinder. And our surface area formula for all of our cylinders is 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi rh. So that's from your formula sheet. What is the radius of that bottom one?
The bottom was 6.
The bottom one is 6 because the diameter is 12. So we'll put into our formula 2 pi, and then where the radius you'll write 6 plus 2 pi. Oh, we need to make a height for each of these. Let's say the height of each one, they all have the same height of 2 centimeters. 2 pi, the radius is 6, and we just made up a height of 2. Now, if you were given this question on the test or a quiz, all of the numbers would have been given for you. So when we get to our in-class assignment, all the numbers are on there that you need. Or at least all the numbers are on there so that you can find all the numbers you need. Now, if we type this into our calculator to figure out what this is equal to, we get a 301.6. So our first one, 301.6. Yeah, we'll subtract the areas after. So we'll start this way. That would be the surface area of the entire thing, including the entire top and the entire bottom. So we're going to leave some space here because we're going to subtract afterwards the parts that aren't iced. Unless we want to figure it out all at the same time, but let's just do the surface area of each one separately and then think about if we pulled it apart, what would we have to subtract from each of them. So we can set it up already for our 4 cylinders. It's going to be the same surface area formula, but our second biggest one, what is the radius of that one going to be? 5. So quickly type this into my calculator. And this one has a surface area of 219.9. The third one, what is the radius of the third one? 4. So these questions aren't necessarily hard. They're just tedious because you have to do a lot of calculations with your calculator. You have to type a lot of things in. You have to be neat and organized because you have a lot of data that you're working with. So how I numbered each of those sections helps me organize it for later when I'm going to think about what's on there and what's off of there. Yes. And finally, for the fourth one, the smallest one, what is the radius on the smallest one? Perfect. So it's 3. So I rounded to 1 decimal place for each of them. So now that would be the surface area if you iced the whole thing, the top, the bottom, and the side. So now let's talk about what actually gets iced here. Okay? We want to calculate the surface area that's going to be iced. Do we ice the bottom? Do you ever take a cake and quickly put icing on the bottom and then put it down? Probably not. So for our first one, if we pulled it apart, we're going to have to subtract a circle off the bottom. And what else are we going to have to subtract off that first one? The top. And the top is going to be a smaller circle than the bottom one. So the bottom circle, how big is the radius? Right? It's going to be 6. Pi r squared is the area of a circle. So we're going to have to subtract the big circle off the bottom. And we're going to have to subtract another circle off the top, which would have a radius of 5. So if we took 301.6 and we subtracted pi times 6 squared, and then we subtract pi times 5 squared, we get 109, well, rounded 109.9 and rounded up will be 110.0. That's our first piece. What's going to be missing on our second piece? If you pulled it apart, what wouldn't be iced? The whole bottom and the circle at the top. How big is the circle at the top? Has a radius of 4. So another organization thing that I'm doing here that sometimes you can't do with your notes because you're only using a pencil, but you see how I'm using different colors? So I can remind myself what I was doing, that I'm subtracting something off of the whole thing. So now if I subtract, I get 91.1 is all that's left. Third one, same thing. How many circles are taken off of the third one? The entire bottom and a smaller circle on the top, right? So we're going to have to take off the entire bottom. How big is the bottom? Has a radius of 4. And how big is the one on the top? Has a radius of 3. So type that into your calculator. 72.3. And finally, the last one. Can you see the one right at the top? What's the only thing that doesn't get iced on the one on the top? Just the bottom, right? You only have to subtract that one circle. Because if we look at the picture, right, if we pulled this all apart, this top one would still have icing on the top. So we just have to subtract the circle at the bottom, and the circle at the bottom has a radius of 3. So 94.2 minus pi times 3 squared, 65.9. Now we got to add all of those up for total surface area. So we take our 65.9 plus our 72.3 plus our 91.1 plus, what was the first one? 110.0. And since we are dealing with centimeters and we're dealing with area, this will be centimeters squared. None of the math is really, really, really difficult. There's just a lot of it. There's a lot of data that you're dealing with. So you have to be organized. You have to set up a plan. make neat notes, write out your ideas, and so I figured out all of them first without subtracting anything. Then I thought about each one. What would I have to subtract from this one? What would I have to subtract from this one? And then I can add it up to get my total surface area in the end. Are you glad we didn't pick a 10 level cake?